Hello everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So this week has been a little quiet on the news front, I gotta say. It's been somewhat of a relief. That's not to say that there hasn't been news happening, not to say that there hasn't been controversies afoot. But before we get into this week's controversies, I want to touch on a topic that I talked about last week, and I was hoping to have an update by now, but apparently not. And that's the executive order that Trump had announced that he would be doing last weekend when he was at CPAC about defunding universities that did not adhere to some sort of free speech criteria. I had assumed at some point this week we would see a draft of this EO, but it's apparently just been memory hold. I guess, like, nobody's talked about it since CPAC. Nobody seems to have any new information on it. Trump's not talking about it anymore. Nobody's talking about it, so I don't know what happened, but I guess I don't know if we're still getting this EO. It's just like the story just got completely dropped, and, like, nobody's discussed it since CPAC, so I just thought that was a little weird, and I was interested in seeing where this was going to go, but I guess it's nowhere, at least for now, or until Trump needs some other distraction from some other thing, I guess. I don't know. But we do have two controversies from this past week, and we'll go ahead and start with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's new campaign finance scandal-ish thing, maybe, depending on how far somebody wants to take it. And I kind of want to wind this story all the way back to the beginning, because a lot of the news outlets that are covering this now, and it is kind of sort of being covered by news outlets, although it's kind of low key as they possibly can, haven't really mentioned where this story started. So all the way back in the beginning, because this story goes places. It all started with somebody sending Luke Thompson screenshots from the House email, not the email, but like their internal website, showing that AOC's boyfriend, Riley Roberts, had his own House.gov email address, and that for a brief shining moment, he was listed as part of her official staff on the House.gov webpage. So people started investigating into this, and for what it's worth, the House has said that it's okay for him to have this email address, and here's their rules on it. To have a House.gov email address, you have to either be a representative, you have to be a member of their staff, or you have to be a spouse. Basically, if you have a spouse and you want to give them access to, say, your official calendar or whatever, they can have a House.gov email address, and then they can access your calendar that way, which is the excuse that AOC's can't put out for him having the email address in the first place, was that it was for calendar syncing purposes, whatever. The kind of the bigger story there was that he was listed as a member of her staff on the site. Now, House rules are very, very specific about this too. And it is that you can have your spouse, family members, I guess this would also extend to boyfriends, girlfriends, although that's not really a super common situation, because obviously most people who are representatives are married because they're older. Anyway, you can have these people on your staff so long as they are volunteer staff. You cannot hire people from your family, you can't hire your spouse, you can't hire people from their family and pay them for obvious reasons. I mean, you can see where if you got elected to the House and then you could just hire your whole family and get them all paid on the taxpayer dime, like, you could see where that would go bad pretty quick. So that in and of itself wouldn't be that big a deal. You could just say that he was there as a volunteer, and that's fine. Except for the fact that her camp has made it kind of a talking point and kind of made a big to-do over the fact that everybody on their staff is paid. Nobody is a volunteer. Everybody is earning a paycheck. They're not using free labor, basically, was the point that they were trying to make. But then how do you explain Riley he technically shouldn't be there then. So all of this kind of got erased. His email address seems to no longer exist, his house.gov email address. But that whole situation started people looking into her campaign finances. And somebody had done some digging and found that during her campaign, there had been a payment made to Roberts for $6,000 for quote-unquote strategic consulting, which strategic consulting is every bit of a bullshit claim as it sounds. It's kind of one of those, you can't really prove it, you can't really disprove it, so it's one of those ones that you can kind of fill in and try to pretend like it's legit, but I mean, really, we all know. So that was found out, that was made public, and then people started digging even further into her campaign finances. And that's how we got to this particular campaign finance scandal. Like I said, this story goes places. Like, this all started because one person dropped dime to Luke Thompson, who is a journalist. I forget what outlet he works for. I'm so sorry. But he tweeted it out. Everybody else kind of picked up on it. And this all started with an email address. And now we're at something that may be actionable campaign finance violations. So I told you all that to tell you this. And this, I will go ahead and confess, is going to get a little bit in the weeds as far as campaign finance laws, regulations, ethics are concerned. So I will try to keep this as simple as humanly possible. But this centers around her former top aide / current chief of staff, Shoykot Chakrabarti. And I'm going to go ahead and read some excerpts from the piece that the Washington Examiner did on this, because it kind of explains it a little better than I can as to what is happening here and why this is a potential campaign finance violation. Basically, he founded a PAC called Brand New Congress in 2016 and another called Justice Democrats in 2017, with the stated goal of helping elect progressive candidates to Congress. One of those candidates was Ocasio-Cortez, who last November, age 29, became the youngest woman ever elected to Congress. According to the Brand New Congress website, the PAC would build a unified campaign infrastructure, including fundraising, organizing, rallies, and advertising progressive congressional candidates across the country, and could plug into saving individual campaigns time and money. Our idea is really to run a single unified presidential-style campaign that is going to look a lot like the Bernie Sanders campaign, said Chakrabarti in an interview with MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. The campaign infrastructure and fundraising is set aside from the campaigning. Now, I point out all of that to make the point that these two particular PACs were not formed specifically to fund AOC, but they are PACs that exist to fund progressive candidates wherever they may happen to be. And so that kind of plays into why this is kind of a problem. So moving back to the piece. In 2016 and 2017, Chakrabarti's PAC raised about $3.3 million for the project, primarily from small donors. During this time, the committees transferred over $1 million to two shell companies controlled by Chakrabarti with names similar to one of the PACs, Brand New Campaign LLC and Brand New Congress LLC, according to federal election filings. Now, to try to kind of explain why this is a no-no. When PACs receive and spend money, and a PAC is a political action committee, you have to be able to show to the FEC and also to your donors money in, money out. Like, you have to be very, very transparent about who's sending in money and what you're spending that money on. Once you move it from the PAC to an LLC, a limited liability corporation, those reporting rules don't exist the same way they do for PACs. You don't have to be anywhere near as transparent when you're spending money out of an LLC as you are out of spending money out of a PAC. So that's why this looks a little shady, because now you're moving money from an entity that very much has to be held accountable to the FEC to an entity that does not. And you don't necessarily have to show where that money goes after it goes into the LLC. Like, you don't have to provide filings on what you spent money on, how much you spent it on, who you spent it on, and $1 million is a lot of money. So if you take 3.3 million that are in the 2 PACs, you transfer 1 million to 2 LLCs, that's a lot of money to not be accountable for. And for what it's worth, I know these don't sound like huge numbers as far as like campaign numbers, but you got to remember, this is not a national race. This wasn't even a statewide race. This was a House representative race for a fairly small district in New York City. And that's not to say that all the money that went into the PACs was specifically to fund AOC, because like I said, these were not AOC specific PACs. They were PACs to fund progressive candidates of all stripes that I guess would be picked by Charabanti. Like, I don't really know how the PACs would choose who to support. But anyway, moving back to the piece. A few weeks after starting the Brand New Congress PAC, Charabanti formed one of the companies, Brand New Campaign LLC, in Delaware, using a registered agent service and a mailbox-only address. Yes, that is every bit as shady as fuck as it sounds. So, you started these PACs, you got money, you started these private corporations that don't actually really have offices, and you transferred money into them. Yeah, that sounds a little suspicious. And so, moving on. Over the next 7 months, as small dollar political donations poured into the PAC from progressives across the country, the committee transferred over $200,000, 82% of the contributions to the company Brand New Campaign LLC. The payments were for strategic consulting, according to federal elections filings. They were sent to an apartment address listed for Charabanti in the Greenwich Village area of Manhattan. So you see, now you understand the point that I was trying to make about the strategic consulting bullshit claim before. Yeah, it's one of those catch-alls that's... Politicians use it. I mean, she's hardly the first, and people made the argument that Trump kind of did the same thing, although his situation was quite different because that's a whole nother ball of wax. But basically, that whole setup that Trump was using was specifically for Trump by himself, just Trump as candidate. But anyway, so now you've got money coming into these PACs. You've got money going from the PAC to a limited liability corporation, and now this other one has an address that is Charabanti's home personal address in Manhattan. Yeah, that sounds dodgy as fuck. Moving on. In 2017, Brand New Congress PAC transferred another $240,000 to Brand New Congress LLC. You see how this is confusing with the names? That's why you really kind of like try to keep up with it, because it's specifically supposed to be very confusing. Anyway, in 2017, Brand New Congress PAC transferred another $240,000 to Brand New Congress LLC, also for strategic consulting. Another PAC co-founded by Charabanti that year, Justice Democrats, transferred an additional $605,000 to Brand New Congress LLC in 2017. Stop me when this stops sounding like a money laundering operation. I mean, this is straight up money laundering. Like, I don't know if it really counts as like the RICO version of money laundering, but the FEC is currently investigating this. There has already been a claim filed, and they are looking into this. But yeah, this is not shit you can do. And for what it's worth, campaign finance laws are really just convoluted and difficult to understand and really just Byzantine. And there's a lot of stupid little nitpicky things you can do, things you can't do. But this right here is kind of campaign finance 101. And that's, you can't move money from a PAC to an LLC and just do that just because you want to. Because you're supposed to be, quote unquote, simplifying things. Like, that's not simplifying things. There's nothing wrong with taking money into a PAC and spending money out of the PAC. Like, transferring money to another entity actually makes things more complicated. So the whole idea that, oh, we're just transferring it from a PAC to an LLC because to make things easier, like, and that's the excuse they're going with right now, is pretty much blatant bullshit. I mean, it's a little hard to not interpret this as anything other than trying to skirt around the filing rules for PACs and showing that what you spent your money on. I mean, you're basically trying to play a little shell game. And so you got these large sums of money that are just gone now, just in the ether. Like, nobody really knows where this fucking money is anymore. It goes into the LLC, it's gone. Like, who knows? But that's kind of the nexus of what is going on with her story as far as campaign finance violations. Obviously, there is an open investigation. We will see what happens with that. We'll see how far anybody wants to take this. But my bigger question about this, I mean, obviously the campaign finance thing is something, but I'm reading this stuff and I'm like, who the fuck is Sharkrit Sharabati? Like, where did this dude come from? So I started doing a little bit of digging. And apparently he's Harvard educated, graduated with a computer science degree, made millions of dollars on Wall Street, made millions of dollars in Silicon Valley, was one of the original engineers for Stripe. And so he made his money there and got out of the industry, I guess. It's not entirely sure. And then decided he was going to go into politics. So he founds these PACs, he raises money, whatever. Here's my thing. First off, I'm interested to know how these two got hooked up. And I don't mean that in any kind of like salacious way. I'm just like, how did they find each other? Because this dude, up until now, I mean, he was with Bernie's campaign. He had done some stuff for Bernie's campaign. I think he was just an organizer, just like a community organizer. I don't think he really had any kind of like massive role in the Bernie campaign. But now all of a sudden, here he is, and he's got these PACs, he's got money, and he finds AOC, they find each other, not quite sure how that happens, and then all of a sudden, she's like a fucking superstar. It kind of, for me, is poking holes in the whole good old Alex from the Block narrative, and it's looking a little bit more to me like she might be out of central casting. Like this, I don't think this campaign is quite as organic as it was made out to be. And I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, she certainly wouldn't be the first political candidate kind of plucked out of somewhere because they would just perfectly fit a role. But when your whole brand is about being authentic, all of a sudden having a Silicon Valley / Wall Street millionaire who was your top aide, who ran these PACs that funded your campaign, and who is now your chief of staff, and I emphasize that because that is a very high-profile role for somebody who doesn't have any experience actually being a House staffer at all, let alone much experience in politics in general, to have. Like, all of a sudden, like, you just, like, leapfrogged your way into one of the most powerful positions in the House right now, because obviously AOC is one of the most popular people in the House. Like, she has more followers than Nancy Pelosi. Like, whenever she does something, I mean, if the woman farts, we have to talk about it. And being her chief of staff is a very powerful position. So where the hell did this dude come from? Like, how did this happen? Like, I'm very curious. And not that it makes much of a difference on anything, or maybe it does if we do ever find out the backstory, but it's just interesting to me that this whole thing is starting to look, and by this whole thing, I mean AOC's campaign, is not quite as it was initially presented. And so that part, to me, was just really curious. And I'm wondering if anybody else will ever pick up on that and kind of run with it a little further than I did. But that's where we're at with AOC and her campaign finance violations, allegedly, possibly, maybe. And it's funny because she is one of those who's made such a big fucking deal about dark money and transparency in campaign finance and all that kind of stuff. And here you are. Yep. You had your boyfriend on the payroll. you have this situation where your top advisor / now chief of staff has been moving money around in ways that are not entirely kosher. She's a swamp creature. Like, she's going to be a member of the swamp so quickly. Like, this is all going to go so bad. I feel bad for anybody who is a true believer in AOC, because she's going to end up just like all the rest. Just another swampy hypocrite who says one thing, does another, expects everybody else to live a certain way while herself not abiding by any of the rules that she wants anybody else to live by, which that was kind of another little mini controversy, as her little Green New Deal thing where we have to eliminate carbon emissions and we need to cut back on all this kind of stuff. But she's out here taking Ubers right and left. I mean, you live in New York City. There's a subway system. I've been on it. It's pretty damn decent. Like, you can get away with not using private transportation in New York City. Literally hundreds of thousands of people do it in New York City. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those do as I say, not as I do, which, again, insert socialist joke here, because isn't that always the way it ends up? It's always the elites that get to live their lives and still stay relatively comfortable and well-fed and happy and getting all their money, and everybody else is fucked. Because they're never expected to live by the rules that they want to lay out for other people. No, that's not for the elites. That's for the plebes. That's for you and me. That's not for her. No, transparency is not for her. No, taking public transportation isn't for her. She's got to go take an Uber and an SUV somewhere. But anyway, moving on to the other big controversy of the week, which Ilhan Omar, again, here we go. In the midst of giving some comments that were critical of Israel, she made the comment that those who support Israel have quote-unquote dual loyalties, basically meaning that their loyalty is not strictly to the United States, but that they owe some kind of loyalty to Israel too, because they back Israel or anyone that supports Israel. Now, this, once again, because this woman cannot seem to keep her foot out of her freaking mouth for longer than 5 minutes, this started a whole nother round of, is she anti-Semitic? Is that anti-Semitic? What is anti-Semitic? You're anti-Semitic, you're not anti-Semitic, blah, 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 blah. Which is basically like every time this woman opens her damn mouth. So, the idea, and going back to what she said, the dual loyalties thing, that is a thing that kind of has been thrown out at Jews for a long time, about how Jews aren't really loyal to the U.S. in the same way that other people are loyal to the U.S., that they have divided loyalties, and that if the time were ever to come where they had to pick one, kind of the quiet part of the people who make the dual loyalty crowd seem to think that they'll side with Israel. Now, here's my thing, and I want to try to explain this as well as I possibly can. So, and this kind of touches on a lot of the controversy that happens every time somebody says anything about Israel that is not 100% happy, glowy nonsense. You can criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. I've said that before. I will keep saying it. I will try to explain it a little bit right now. It seems to me that there are certain people who want to dress up anti-Semitic comments as criticisms of Israel. There are other people who seem to think that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. That is not true, and the people who want to dress up anti-Semitism as criticisms of Israel are trying to use a fig leaf that they should not be given. Now, like I said, it is perfectly fine to criticize Israel. That is not anti-Semitic. When you criticize Jews as a whole, and then you try to dress it up as, oh, I'm just criticizing Israel, you're full of shit. Because there are Jews who are not Zionists. You have Jews that really don't take a position on Israel. You have pro-Palestinian Jews. So if your criticism is of Israel, then criticize Israel. Don't criticize Jews or people who support Israel. It's two separate things. And yes, I am aware Israel is an ethno-state. I know that. I do not need it explained to me. That being said, it's perfectly fine to have criticisms of Israel that would be criticisms of any country, no matter, even if it was, say, a Christian ethno-state, or a Muslim ethno-state, or a Buddhist ethno-state, or any other religion. Israel does commit crimes. I mean, they commit human rights violations. The way they treat Palestinians is not okay. It's not anti-Semitic to point that out. No more so than it would be for us to point out how Muslims mistreat women or gays in their countries. That's not Islamophobic to point that out. It's just stating a fucking fact. So, the whole anti-Semitism thing is something that it's a very hard thing to try to explain in a rational manner because it's something that so many people have a personal feeling about. And as far as Jews who do see this as anti-Semitic, I kind of get it. Like, okay, I understand being part of what is right now very much an out-group and being perhaps a little oversensitive to certain things, or perhaps being the right amount of sensitive and wanting to point out the things that I just pointed out, which is that there are people that want to criticize Jews and dress it up as criticism of Israel and want to rightfully point out that distinction, but because they are Jewish, it all gets kind of lumped into this, oh, you're accusing somebody of being anti-Semitic. It's like, it can be two separate things. It should be two separate things. And it's so everybody in their feels right now. And I think this is really one of those where Twitter does not help this shit at all, because you cannot convey what I just said in 280 characters. Like, unless you want to do like a 20-piece tweet thread that nobody's going to read, you can't do the nuance of this situation on that platform. So this is one where I think social media is really, really hurting this conversation, because you can't have this conversation on social media. And if you try to make any of the points that I just made on Twitter, you will get dogpiled. You will get people showing up in your replies to tell you how you're wrong, or you're anti-Semitic, or you're pro-Palestine, or you're pro-Islam. And it's just like, no, you're just trying to make a nuanced argument that nobody is really trying to hear right now. And that's actually another problem with this whole anti-Semitic, Israel-Palestine sort of thing that is going on right now. And that's that a lot of people still like to look at things in a very binary way. And so they assume that if you have criticisms of Israel, then that automatically means you're pro-Palestine, which, again, it does not. Just the same way as if you say something critical of Hillary, that doesn't mean you're pro-Trump. It just means you have criticisms of this one person. You may have criticisms of the other person too. It's perfectly valid to have criticisms of Israel and to also have criticisms of Palestine. Like, it's one of these where it's like, you just kind of wish you could just turn down everybody's emotional dial a little bit so you can have something of a rational conversation about this. But I don't know how you do that. I certainly don't know how you do it through social media. I don't think that is the right platform at all for this. But anyway, I wanted to get that off my chest. And like I said, you can't do that on Twitter. Like, this conversation can't happen on Twitter. But what the House did in response to this new situation, and I know I talked about what happened last time. Ilhan Omar said some shit. I don't even remember what the hell she said. But everybody was calling for Pelosi to censure her and to pull her off of the Foreign Relations Committee. And that did not happen. Again, she did not get censured. And for what it's worth, I don't give a fuck if you censure her or not. Like, I do whatever you want to do. Like, it doesn't really make a difference to me. Anyway, what the House did instead of just handling the fact that one House member said a thing that some people felt was anti-Semitic and that other people did not feel was anti-Semitic, instead of just handling that between Pelosi and Omar, or just handling it just with Omar herself, because she's the one that said it, they decided to craft this stupid bill that ends up saying, we condemn all hate in all forms. And her name is never mentioned specifically. And that's what's pissed a lot of people off, is that she started this whole shit and her name is not mentioned in the bill. And it somehow went from a bill condemning anti-Semitism to a bill condemning all the hate. Like, I think it actually spends more time condemning Islamophobia than it does anti-Semitism. But of course we had to put in there that we don't discriminate against Hispanics or gays or anybody else or Asians, everybody. This has to be an everybody bill now. And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? But what was interesting about this is this finally like evidence that intersectionality has made its way to Congress? Because this turned into something that was an incident with one person, and now we have this bill that had to include every fucking buddy in the bill. Like, everybody had to get their particular pet cause and their particular pet group in the bill to make sure that, oh, you're mentioned too in our little anti-hate bill. And it's just like, it had nothing to do with anybody else. I mean, the only thing that it had anything to do possibly was with anti-Semitism. That's it. Nobody else was involved in this. Nobody else had to be mentioned. But no, we turned it into this big dog and pony show where, once again, Omar is not going to be punished directly for any of this. And that's, feel however you will about it. Like I said, I genuinely don't care. Like, I don't care. I'm not that head up about it. But it just, it turned this whole, just a total fucking shit show. Like, this is not what the House needed to be wasting their time doing. Like, making some bullshit vanity bill. And then, of course, people wanted to make a big deal about anybody who didn't vote for the bill. And there were some people trying to make a big deal about the fact that apparently 12 Republicans did not vote yes on the bill. Which, yeah, of course not. They're not participating in your dumbass struggle session. I would vote no on it too, because I'm not putting my name to that nonsense. I don't have any problem with people not wanting to put their name to some freaking bullshit, intersectional, anti-hate statement thingamajig. Like, I have no problem with that. But that's where that ended up, and people are still pissed about it. People are still fighting on social media about it, and it's just, it's another one of those where it's showing that the left has a weird kind of problem with Jews, kind of, sort of. And this isn't really news for those of us who cover things like actually watching what's going on in lefty circles. And I know we talked about it when I talked about the Women's March and kind of how everything went to shit there. But it was weird to see this all explode onto the House floor. Like this weird, their weird little version of the JQ. And it just kind of, that was weird. And I would imagine it would be very weird to anybody who doesn't normally follow this kind of stuff. And they're probably looking at this like, what the hell is going on? But yeah, I guess the intersectional JQ has officially made its way to Congress. And I don't know. We got a don't hate anybody bill, not a don't hate Jews bill. And not that needed to be happened either. Like, it should be pretty obvious that no, we don't condone anti-Semitism. Like, you don't have to make a big fucking deal over not it. Like, anyway. Moving on, because that's not the only controversial thing, controversial-ish, not controversial to me at all, but controversial to other people, apparently, thing that Omar said this week. So she gave an interview to Politico for a piece that they were doing on her and another House representative, and she had made some comments about Obama that apparently some people didn't like. I didn't see anybody not like them, but I want to go ahead and say them verbatim because honestly, I don't see the problem here at all. She told Politico that the Obama administration was also responsible for the droning of countries around the world and the caging of kids at the U.S.-Mexico border. We can't be only upset with Trump. His policies are bad, but many of the people who came before him also had really bad policies. They were just more polished than he was, she said. And that's not what we should be looking for anymore. We don't want anyone to get away with murder because they are polished. We want to recognize the actual policies that are behind the pretty face and the smile. Okay, first off, where's the lie? There is no lie to be found anywhere in this statement. This is the truth. Yeah, Obama needs to be pointed out a little more often on this one because these aren't just Trump's policies. These were Obama's policies, and they were Bush's policies. This didn't fucking just start. It goes back ages. Two presidents ago started this. Not Trump. But apparently some people got mad over the getting away with murder part and saying that you shouldn't be able to do it and hide behind a pretty face and a smile. Obviously, nobody that I follow was mad about this. We were all pretty much like, yeah, that's absolutely correct. But apparently, somebody somewhere got mad about it. And so she tried to walk this back in the dumbest, stupidest, most awkward way possible. She put up her version of the recording, which, pro tip, I mean, if I was somebody in her position, I would also be doing my own recordings of my own interviews too, just to cover my own ass, just in case something I said did get misconstrued. However, she puts up the audio of the interview, and she tweets out about it, making the claim that Tim Alberta, who I think actually wrote the article, somehow misquoted her or misattributed what she said or twisted her words. The problem is, per her own recording that she posted up on SoundCloud and tweeted out, that is exactly what she said in the context in which she said it. And so, obviously, everybody and their mama pointed that out. Tim even tweeted out at her like, yeah, your recording says exactly what I said you said. And by the way, I'd appreciate an email next time before you do something like this. Which, yeah, that is kind of professional courtesy. I mean, if you're going to make a big deal out of saying that somebody lied, and first of all, they didn't lie, and second of all, you don't even want to give that person a chance to respond to you in private, like, that's a dick move. But again, freshman representative, she doesn't know what she's doing, and she doesn't know what she's saying. Like, she's not a grown-ass woman with children of her own. She's 37. She's an adult. She knows what the fuck she's doing. She knows the words that are coming out of her mouth. Nancy, stop treating her like she's a fucking child who doesn't understand things. But, so, after probably about 24 hours of everybody piling onto her, pointing out that, yeah, you said exactly what you said, she just quietly deleted the tweet. And I don't think she really acknowledged deleting the tweet, but obviously we all notice these things because this is who we are and this is what we do now. But it was just the dumbest self-own. Like, first, who was even mad at what you said anyway? Second, I mean, what, are we still not allowed to criticize Obama? But what was interesting is the amount of people that were not criticizing her, which is kind of an interesting thing to note. Obviously, nobody on the right, none of the libertarians, but a fair amount of lefties were not criticizing her either, which kind of gives you an idea of where the temperature is on that side of the Democratic pool. Okay, so there are people out there who are willing to declare open season on Obama's past, on his administration, his legacy. I'm with it. Let's do this. Let's go. Let's point out all the shit Obama did over the 8 years that nobody wanted to talk about while he was in office. But I guess now we can talk about it. I'm cool with that. We can do this. We can do this all day. I am here for it. But that kind of sums up Omar's very bad, no good week. And yeah, I mean, we're going to have this conversation again because this woman cannot keep her foot out of her mouth. And I think there might be something to keeping House representatives / senators / politicians in general the hell off of Twitter. Or at least give the reins to somebody in your staff who's just going to tweet about the bills that you want to pass and the things that you're doing, and you don't end up in these weird situations where you screw up. I don't know. Anyway, the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this up is we finally got actual official word handed down from the courts on Jussie Smollett. So they finally did indict him. 30-page indictment. 16 felony charges. Oh, they mad. They real mad. Because that is not what anybody expected at all. I think when they originally took him in, there was only one felony charge. And now we're up to 16. And they're basically slapping a felony charge onto every time they allege he lied to Chicago PD. Another thing to note about this is strictly Illinois. Like, this does not include anything that the FBI may be charging him with in conjunction to the mail that was sent to him. So that investigation, I don't know if it's still ongoing, I'm assuming, but the FBI has not released their indictment and their charges yet. So there is more to come. Whether this dude will ever see jail time, I don't know. That 16 felony charges on lying to the police, they're pretty fucking pissed. Like, they mad as hell. So I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I did not expect them to kind of throw the book at him that way, but we shall see where that ends up. But I just thought that was really, really interesting that apparently Illinois is taking this very, very seriously. So, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. If you did make it this far, thank you as always. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.